Yo, this is JJ from 845, and today it is all things Edelkrone. This one right here is the Flex Tilt Head version 2, and this one is the StandOne. But what we're really looking at today is the SliderOne Pro. And I know that I said that I'll be reviewing more so on the SliderOne Pro and the Motion Box unit, but I want to kind of give a quick overview of what this thing is right here. This is the StandOne. What it's supposed to solve is having a compact tripod with you in order to level your shots for the sliding shots. So this thing folds up, and this thing is pretty tough actually. So if you can imagine, you would just kind of put this thing out, and this would help elevate your entire shooting rig onto the floor. So other thing is you can actually spread this thing. It almost looks like a spider. And I'll let you know that this thing is actually pretty tough to bend out. So I have no qualms of this thing actually bending while you have a unit on top. So if you can imagine, it's pretty flexible. Think of it like a stiffer version of the Gorilla Pod, the one that has a flexible feet. So as you can see right here, there are, I guess you can count this as one, but one joint, 2, 3. So there's about 3 joints in order to adjust your camera. So you can go from an elevated all the way down to a lower unit. So you can see right here, you can just spread this down. So especially if you have uneven flooring or terrains, you can obviously level your camera with this little gizmo. Again, a nice thing that Edelkrone does is that they make all of their stuff pretty small and compact. And so if you are limited with all your gear, you can for sure squeeze this all in order to make traveling a whole lot easier. First time using it, and it's pretty stiff. And it looks like, here we go. So you got to bend it down first. So this is my first look. That's why I'm a little bit awkward with this unit. But you can see right here, it's actually pretty compact. And it does what it says it's supposed to do. This right here is the Flex Tilt Head version 2. And what this is supposed to solve is it's supposed to allow your camera to tilt. So hence the name Flex Tilt Head. So on the bottom right here, you have a 3/8. That way you can mount this directly onto your tripod or the receiving end of, say, a slider. And from here, you would mount your camera on top. So again, like all their products, they're pretty compact. And once it's mounted, if you can imagine, it's actually pretty stiff. You're going to be able to tilt your camera. So if your tripod's over here, you mount this on top, or again, like I said, you can mount this on top of your slider and your slider on top of a tripod. You put this on top, mount the camera right here. Again, it has a standard 1/4 inch, so you can just twist this and lock your camera in place. And so if you wanted an overhanging shot, for example, you'd be able to twist this head and go that way. I would say it's pretty good construction. The fact that it's pretty much all metal. The actual joints right here, they do come with Allen wrenches, and so at this point you'd be able to tighten this as needed or loosen it, because the unit itself has no way to actually increase or decrease the tension. So you're gonna have to go in with an Allen wrench key and do it from there. So that's the good and bad of it, but the actual tension is pretty tough. So I'm actually using a lot of strength just to push this down. But that is the Flex Tilt Head. Before I go into the SliderOne Pro unit, I kind of want to go over the actual first version of the SliderOne, and this is where it all began. Initially, Edelkrone came out with this slider, and what they were advertising is that for the most part, when you are getting a sliding shot, you kind of don't need that really long rail, because in the actual edit, you're only including about a few seconds in of your actual slide. And then people kind of said, oh, that'd be perfect if it was motorized. And so Edelkrone came out with their motion module unit. So this thing is powered by a Canon LPE6 battery. So at this point, I'm sure most of you guys have that already. And what you would do is you would basically mount this on top there's a 3/8 the thread right here. You would just mount this right here, and then you would just kind of screw it in. So what you have here is basically still a compact unit. It's kind of heavy, but at least gives you the peace of mind. And it actually has a good payload. And so during my review of this unit, I put my FS5 along with a 1835 Sigma lens, and I just put this on the ground and just for a test, and had this thing pretty much slide from left to right and right to left. Again, they're keeping a minimalistic design. There are no buttons. You can't set any ins and outs on here. You'd have to do it all through the app, and so that's good and bad, because when you are shooting, you're going to have your iPhone out, and I kind of recommend anytime you're using this product to mount your actual phone onto your camera, either on the handle, or I've seen some people actually have an iPhone holder on the wrist, and so as they're sliding, they can make the adjustments on the wrist, or of course the phone that's mounted onto the camera. So this is the older unit, and here's a side-by-side comparison. And to my surprise, the newer unit on my right hand is actually longer than the first one. Probably because they just kept it all contained, and to me that's kind of surprising. I was going to assume that it was going to be the same length. Both units are powered by the Canon LP-E6 battery, so that goes in right here. I usually don't like fussing with having so many different batteries. My Sony camera runs off of their MPF batteries, and all the accessories can run on DTAP. So I recommend, where did I put it? Getting a cable like this, which is a LP-E6 dummy battery, and that goes into the receiving end. And at the end of this is a male DTAP cable. So this can go into the batteries that I use. I usually use an Anton Bauer or Core SWX, and usually those have a port that I can do this. So all of this is pretty much powered by one battery, both my Atomos monitor. If I'm using this now, it'll be powered by this cable. So here is an overview of the difference between the older unit and the newer unit. The older one actually had an unlock and a lock position. This is if when you're actually sliding it without the unit. And of course, when you are going using this thing manually, there is a tension knob that you can increase the resistance or decrease the resistance. Over here, the newer unit, that is, there is a built-in level, which is great. And then you have the A and B points. So I think on the older unit, there was no A and B points. So when you do look at the app, which I'll open a little bit later, you're going to be able to set your A and B points. So it's good to know that they just made visible markings, so A and B. So if you had this mounted, you'll know, where your camera is sliding from left to right or right to left. Both of them do have a camera port, so if you're into time lapses, you can go ahead and plug your camera directly to here, and then the app will basically interface, with your camera. And as this thing slides, this thing is going to trigger your camera shutter. So as it goes, it'll take a photo, it advances, take a photo, and so forth, in order to automate your time lapses. So just to see how this thing works with my actual rig, I'm going to see how it stands alone when mounting my FS5 rig with my most used lens. This is the Sigma 18-35. Got the grip, got the handle, and then the included monitor. So we'll see how this thing fits. And I already went ahead and put the Flex Tilt Head over here. So we'll see how this thing works. All right, so I have the FS5 with the Sigma 18-35 mounted onto the Flex Tilt Head that is mounted onto the SliderOne Pro slider. And here is the app. As I mentioned, it's good and bad. Good because it's convenient, it's on your phone, you'll have the app with you. The firmware, for example, updates are done wirelessly, and it did prompt me when I put the battery in to update the slider. Bad because you have to take out your phone to operate this. There is no quick and and really a fast way to get this thing started, because you have to make sure that you've established connection between the phone and the slider. And then you have all these bunch of things that you have to do onto the phone itself. You may get distracted if a notification comes up or if a phone call comes in. So obviously you want to be able to make sure that you kind of put do not disturb or whatnot. Anyways, this is the interface. I can go ahead and manually slide this to the right. This is for the positioning. Going back to the left. But what you really want to be able to use this thing for is the automatic sliding. And so there is a speed, which gives you, if it goes out of focus, the interface shows you the speed. It gives you the duration. So if you have from point A to point B, this is how long it'll take. 27 seconds from point A to point B at about 25% speed. You can ease in and out from A and B, so that way it actually ramps up instead of doing from, here's point A to B, instead of going from boom there and then back, it'll go slowly, it'll go faster and then slow. And again, it goes crawls to slow speed and then fast and then slow. And that's the ease in and ease out. So just for this, I'm gonna go ahead and put it to 100% speed. I want to make sure that I start on point A first, and then I go to point B, and here's go. And that is 100% speed. On my screen, it says it takes about 6.7 seconds. I'm going to reset here again to go to point A. I'm going to lower this thing down to about 37. Or let's just try 30% speed. And here's go. So it's going right now, and I don't know if you can tell, but there is sound that is emitting from it, so it's not nearly silent. I would say for an interview, let me stop this real quick. Let's go back to point A. So anytime that you change settings, by the way, on the phone, you do have to go to point A first. And then when you go from point A to point B, the changes that you made will be reflected. So you can't stop midway, change it, and then go. That was my experience. So let me just put this down to kind of a crawl at around, let's just say 11.7. And that's actually cool. I didn't realize that you could click the percentage and a dial will happen. So I'm going to do it exactly of 10%. And so here's go. And at this speed, it's moving, and I think it's silent enough that you can use this if you want for an interview. And that is my actual intention, is that I do want to be able to use this along with a motion box to have that parallax feel for interviews and whatnot. Just gives another dimension for interviews versus a static shot or even a sliding shot that you have to manually pan your head. And so my intention of buying this entire rig is to replace my Red Rock Micro's one-man crew. I think this track alone helps with being so small. And so let's actually mount this onto a tripod, and I'll grab some footage right now. All right, so that's Skippy, our star for today, sleeping very comfortably on the couch. And here's the rig. So as mentioned, this is the FS5 with 1835 Sigma. Pretty substantial lens and weight in itself. It is precariously on the Flex Tilt Head. Again, I probably wouldn't mount this big camera. It's really meant for small mirrorless or even DSLRs, but hey, at least showing you right now that it works. Onto the SliderOne Pro slider, and onto my trusty tripod from high school. So this is the setup that we're going to test this today. Again, kind of don't like this app, but if you just saw it, it actually just crashed right now. So I'm going to wait. So every time you exit, it will say searching for device. And just to test it from here, I'm going to go ahead and go from A to B. Perfect. That goes right here. And let's just see how this thing works. Again, we are on 11.7 speed. I'm going to press record, and that way you guys can see the footage. So I am recording right now. And we're going to go from here. So This is at 10 speed. It's moving ever so slightly, which is great. Because it's moving so slow at around 11%, I'm gonna stop that. I'm gonna go to point A. I'm gonna change this to 100%, and I'm pressing go right now. And that is 100%. All right, so after a firmware later, I just realized that I probably should have charged this fully, the motion box that is. So I'm kind of cheating it right now. I have it plugged into a USB battery bank. Luckily, Skippy there is still comfortable. And this is actually going to be my first time setting an auto pan. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. Just to show you real quick, here is my first frame, and Skippy is not there. So let's go ahead and do select auto pan. Looks like it is moving it automatically. And it says here, pan your camera to second position. That's where he is actually that I want to be at. Oh, I see. Okay, so let's clear this first. I'm going to start first on point A. And what I'm going to do now is with here, you can actually control the pan from left and right. So I'm going to first start for point A, holding this. So this is our beginning one. And now I'm going to do the set auto pan. And it's going to move the camera from point A to point B. And now it's going to ask me to go ahead and put your camera to the second position. So I'm going to turn that to Skippy right over there. So that way he remains in the center. And now I'm going to press done. And so now it says here, auto pan active. And I'm going to assume when I go from point A to point B, it's going to rotate the camera automatically. So let me roll real quick right now. Pressing record onto the camera. So the camera is recording right now. And I'm going to go ahead and just start first and go actually. So I am noticing right away that the camera is a little bit shaky. And once again, I'm just going to say that, I'm mounting a pretty heavy camera rig onto this. The sticks themselves are pretty stable, but let me make sure real quick that everything is as tight as it can be. And a little bit right now, I'm rolling right now. Skippy kind of woke up a little bit, but let me go ahead and just do go. This is at 64%. Earlier it was at about, I would say 30%. So it's about double the speed right now. And I can already visibly see that there just are some kinks from the camera. I'm going to do that again. As far as noise wise, it does take a while for it to actually go. And then I'll review the footage just to see which parts of the slider is having some bumps in the slide, preventing it from having an ultra smooth slide. And one thing I did realize was if you press and hold, it'll keep looping. Otherwise, if you just press once, it'll slide from A to B and stop. So if you press and hold the go button, it actually goes from A to B and B to A continuously. So here's that from A to B, and then it's going to automatically go from B, go back to A. All right, so that was a first look of the unit, the Edelkrone SliderOne Pro, along with the Motion Box unit. and getting some footage off of that with our model Skippy. And so I do have a dilemma as far as me wholeheartedly liking this unit. I will say that out of, say, 5 stars, I would rate this as a 3 out of 5. Only because that, I right off the box, as far as what Edelkrone's selling, to me, this is what every, I guess, mobile videographer, cinematographer, dreams of, is that people would want a motorized slider in order to get perfect slides from A to B and B to A. I would say people want to eliminate the shakiness that people sometimes have of pushing in manually the slider. I also do believe and agree with Edelkrone that for the most part, for an edit, you really don't need a long track. To be able to slide this amount is definitely enough as far as what you're actually using for the final video that you're editing. And before this thing came out, I was definitely in love and still like my Red Rock Micro's one-man crew in order to get that parallax shots for interviews. And so the dream, I think, again, assuming that other people have, is that instead of carrying that really long, I mean, it's about like 4 feet or 4.5 feet wide. I kind of forget how long it is. It's not that it's heavy. It's just that it's really a big thing to lug. That this would be a dream, is to have that similar parallax movement for interviews, but something as compact as this. I mean, I'm the type of person who's currently trying to fit everything that I really need in 2 luggages, in my away luggages. And so this thing obviously would be able to fit that. And then with the motion box, that makes it all possible to make those parallax movement. Or if you're doing product shots, in order to have that repeatable shots of the parallax shot from A to B. So with this unit, it makes that possible. The only thing that I have that's keeping me from making this rating, I don't know, a 4 or 5 out of 5, is that, as we saw, just again out of the box, that any speed below 50% was unusable. I mean, for some reason, the gears are introducing the shake. And I did check as far as the weight capacity limit of the unit, is that you should be able to use this with 15 pounds. And so definitely with the FS5 unit, it's definitely under that 15-pound limit. Again, the probable use for this is not really meant for those big rigs anyway, because if you're bringing a big camera, you probably have bigger grip gear, but it's probably best to be used with a smaller mirrorless or DSLR cameras. But with the initial test, just showing that at least above 50% of the speed from A to B, is that the footage is usable. So whatever's happening as far as not being able to stabilize or create smooth shots with 50% below, I'm going to assume that it's the motor. I'm going to hope that it's just a firmware update, that the motor in itself can have smaller increments when it comes to dialing it in, the motor moving that slow. So I'm hoping that it's going to be okay with some firmware updates. And I have not checked other experiences with other people with the unit, or check any forums, or for that matter. But one can always hope that when you buy something, I mean, in particular, this expensive, is that out of the box, it would work as advertised. And I would say for the most part, it does. But as we saw in the footage, it's just unusable, anything below that 50%, with that certain combo with the FS5, with the included grip handle, top handle, and then a fairly heavy lens, which is a Sigma 18-35. So like I said, I want to say without a scale, that is below 15 pounds. At least this thing can support along with this. But I'll be curious to see how other people are experiencing this. So I do hope that this thing was useful. It was my literal first take and first try using this straight out of the box. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. And I'll get back to you guys. Cheers.